Hi, Lori.
Hello, Elaine. It's always so good to see you.
It's always so good to see you. The sun is shining. So lovely.
I know I've been out in my garden quite a bit the last couple of weeks, which is a little dangerous. For those of us who are working from home, and I've had a home office long before COVID. And so the discipline factor is a little bit trickier when I have work that is not like have a due date. And it's convincing myself to stay in front of my laptop when I could be out planting sunflowers. So I'm imagining some of the callers are also feeling the pull to be outside.
Yes. It's so Portland centric too, right? It's like that episode of Portlandia when there's like that one piece of sunshine, you gravitate towards it. Like, let me get a little piece of that sun.
Absolutely. And I also love that, it'll be 55 and sunny and all of us are in our shorts and tank tops and freaking out like it's the middle of summer.
It's supposed to be like 80 on Friday. So I'm
I heard that was coming up. So I want to say to all of you joining us, we're going to take a couple of minutes for folks to come in and get settled, that not only are there lots of other ways that you could be spending your time, but you could be sitting out on your back deck or putzing in your garden. And maybe you should be. Maybe you want to take advantage of this call to like just be on your phone and listen to what's happening and go for a walk in the park or sit on your front porch. If we're here to talk about cultivating psychological safety, part of that is trusting what you need and how you can be most present on this call for the next 90 minutes.
I love the idea of doing this, listening to this event outside.
Yeah. Curious to know where folks are joining from. Do we have a largely Portland, Oregon crew? We've learned last time we had some folks calling us from the UK and New Jersey and back east. If you'd like to, while we're just still waiting a couple minutes for folks to join, let us know where you're joining from and maybe what you're hoping to learn here today. Some folks from Portland. Hi, Alexis. Leeds, UK. All right. I know some of you have become regulars and others of you might be joining us for the first time. Some of you may be joining us because, like Elaine and I, you're big Dacia fans. And if you're not a Dacia fan yet, you will be by the end of this. And to let you all know that we do record these and make them available. So if something comes up and you have to hop off the call permanently, or you just get a little bit distracted, know that it'll be made available. We just stop recording when we get to the Q&A. Yes, Michelle Neese, also here from Portland and another Dacia fan. Creating beneficial work environments. Thank you, Trace. It is time for change. Morning, Emily, or afternoon, whatever it is in your time zone. And again, if this is your first time joining, we really do encourage you to engage in the chat as you feel comfortable. You do you. And no, Stephen, you're chatting with all of us. Oh, panelists, not everyone. I think, Elaine, this often happens, that we need to set the chat so that it's to everyone and not just the panelists.
Yeah, in the chat box, you'll see a 2 and a drop-down menu. So you'll want to select panelists and attendees. I know it defaults.
Yeah, default panelists. Yep. So glad we can get that going now, because there will be lots of opportunities throughout our time together to be able to chat. And I think I'll go ahead and get us going so that we can respect your time and make the best use of our time together. Welcome to our monthly series on cultivating psychological safety. And we're really happy that you're here with us today. We know that you have lots of choices about how you spend your time, and for whatever reason, you decided to be here. So thank you. We see you and we're here with you even in these virtual times. Before introductions, I want to start our time together with a land acknowledgement. For those of us in Portland, We are on the traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin and Kalapuya, Malala, and many other tribes who made their homes here along the Columbia River. Please join us in acknowledging this land and the Indigenous people who have cared for it. And I want to also invite us to sit for a moment with that pause a bit longer, just to allow your bodies and your minds to all show up here, possibly in one piece. We are still living mid-pandemic. We are still living here in the US very much in a place where it is not safe to be Black. We are perhaps taking care of children at home. We are distracted by so many things. And so before we really kick this off and get into a pace of learning and openness and curiosity, I just want to acknowledge that you're all here, and however you showed up is just fine. And just invite all of us to just take one breath at your own pace, inhaling perhaps a sense of calm and some of that curiosity, and exhaling any of your fears or anxiety or distraction that keeps you from showing up here today. And then at any point, you can return to that breath to help center you in our time together. So my name is Lori Eberly, and I use she and her pronouns. I am a licensed clinical social worker and also the founder of Radius, which provides executive coaching and development. We also provide workplace mediation services. And over the last year have also developed some sexual harassment education so that we can help employees better learn to recognize what sexual harassment and misconduct can look and feel like, how to interrupt those patterns, and how to show up for folks who are experiencing that in the workplace. This series is in direct response to the challenges of working remotely during the pandemic over the last year. Every month, Radius and 52 Limited bring you experts to improve your emotional intelligence, teach trust-building skills, and enhance belonging at work. I'd like to kick it over to my partner, Elaine, and she'll introduce herself and tell you a little bit about 52.
Thank you so much, Lori. Hi, my name is Elaine Chia. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at 52 Limited, which is a local staffing agency that specializes in creative and tech roles. You know, this series is really important to us because we spend so much time at work, more in some cases than we do at home, although now everything is at home. But the idea of feeling safe at work is very important to us. It's very important to our clients. It's very important to our talent. And so I stand by Lori, I stand by Radius, and am so excited about having Daisha join us today to talk more about how we can make our workplaces, our work environments, a safer place to be. Thanks, Lori.
Yeah, thank you, Elaine. So before I introduce Daisha, I want to clarify the format because knowing the structure can help to reduce our anxiety. Daisha will present for about an hour, and then we'll formally take questions around 12:40. Please add your questions into the Q&A option, not the chat box, just because it's easiest for us to find and pull from them later on. But in regards to that chat box, Elaine will be paying attention in there throughout the event, and we want you to feel like you're an active and engaged participant. And please note that today's presentation is being recorded. It is now my pleasure to introduce Daisha. She uses she, her pronouns and identifies as a queer, multiracial daughter of immigrants who for the past 20 years has made a life and a living shifting how racism, power, and oppression impact both individuals and communities. She is a seasoned facilitator, researcher, author, coach, and strategist who delights in midwiving justice and belonging in organizational life. I can also attest that she's just an awesome all-around human being, and it's so great to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, y'all. Hi, everyone. What's good? It's Tuesday. It's beautiful and sunny here in Portland. I'm so excited to be here. You know, I'll be honest, I've been public speaking for like a long time and I still get so nervous. So I just want to name that because that's what's true for me in this moment. And I'm excited to be here to talk about this today. I'm going to share my screen. Give me a sec. And I want to talk a bit about what we're going to be talking about, safety and like psychological safety at work through solidarity. But before we do, I want to just offer an invitation for you today. Elaine and Lori teed this up so nicely, but we are really in the middle of an ongoing, protracted, and complex crisis at multiple levels. Specifically, like Black and Asian bodies are not safe right now. We are in protracted crisis. Folks are tired. So different bodies need different things. I invite you to take care of your body during this session. You're going to hear stuff today. Some of it's going to resonate and some of it's going to be really new and potentially might make you like uncomfortable. So I invite you to try on some both and thinking, that something can be true for me as a speaker and not true for you, and both are valid experiences. I invite you to be curious and ask questions. That's why I'm here, to be in community with you today and to be in dialogue. And finally, what my colleague always says is hold on tightly and let go lightly, which means let's not boil the ocean. It's an hour session. Take what is useful and leave the rest, knowing that, you know, we're not going to walk away with a toolkit of change. We're going to sort of dip into some topics. Some of them might be familiar to you and others might be really fresh, right? And so you might want to return to them later. And with that, I want to talk a little bit about what keeps me busy these days, which is Tusk, which is a company I founded a couple years ago. And this is our organizing principle at Tusk. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing one obsolete. And we at Tusk are really in service to this principle and this spirit of this quote, which is to make systems of oppression fully obsolete. Right? So we're building and working with organizations and institutions in ways that fundamentally change the need or the presence of racism, sexism, classism, xenophobia, and ableism. And we do that by working across three big verticals or areas of work. We work with organizations on cultural strategy and reframing how you are in relationship to one another. We work on systems and systems change work from an approach of living systems. So really seeing companies and organizations as an ecosystem and understanding how we holistically change the structures to reinforce the culture that we'd like to see present. And the third piece of work that we spend time on is product and service design. So who are you in the wider world? Who are you speaking to? How do you make products and services that are not only inclusive, but affirming of all the people that you intend to sort of be here for? Will these slides be available to us? I think we can probably work that out for sure. I mean, there's some pictures of me in these, so like maybe some of them no, but yes, in general, I can totally hook you up with some slides. So this is what we do. And we work across generally strategy and capacitation and coaching and journey mapping as components of this work. And you can find out a bit more about us online at Tusk. Why are we here today? And what I mean is today specifically, not like existentially. I don't think I'm up for that answer today. But when I spoke with Lori and Elaine last fall about psychological safety at work, I was like, oh, yes, I 100% want to talk about this. I know exactly what I want to talk about. And then it took me until like last week to actually figure out how I wanted to talk about what I want to talk about. Because this topic of safety and solidarity has been swirling in my mind and my body and my lived experience for forever. And it took me months to figure out how to articulate the pieces today in a way that were right, that didn't feel too risky. And what I was coming to realize is like, shit, this conversation is going to require me to actually be far more vulnerable and share a bit more about myself in a way than I generally do in conversations. I do a lot of talks on systems change and framework, and I'm a researcher by training. So I do a lot of work in like the intellectual and academic space. And the topic of safety and the topic of solidarity is really just so personal. And so I was freaking out last week. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to have this conversation. And so, like any good procrastinator, I immediately watched all of the seasons of The Handmaid's Tale as research. And I reorganized my sock drawer, and then I reorganized all my fitness apparel. And when I was like, listen, you cannot procrastinate anymore. You have to go do this. You have to go present. You have to get ready to present. So I sat down and watched some TV, because that's what we do as procrastinators. But to my credit, I turned on Brene Brown, who's a favorite of mine. And I imagine some folks here in the audience, although I can't see anyone's faces, so I'm not sure, but I go to her when I need some like anchoring and wisdom. I turned on her Netflix special last week, and she said something that I was like, that kind of woke me up, which is that courageous leaders say the things that need to be said, even when it's really difficult to do it. Right? And I think that's sort of the premise of this series of talks. Because when it comes to safety and organizational life, we have to talk about the things that make us unsafe in order to build containers of safety. And it's just like, it's a kind of a high risk, high reward conversation. So as I was thinking, what has become really clear to me in working in the space of justice and equity in organizational life is that there has been an increasing amount of attention paid to certain areas, certain necessary areas, right? So there's a lot of attention right now being paid to white-bodied accountability in the workplace. And that's great. And that this is actually this is not that talk. This talk, and the topic that feels really relevant to me to share is really about the pieces of work that folks of color need to do to really unpack internalized and lateral oppression and how it shows up in ways that create and replicate systems of oppression. And I want to share with you a definition of what I mean with lateral oppression. So lateral oppression, if you're not familiar with the frame, is the internalization of systems of oppression by those who experience it, where we take that sort of internalized diminishment or violence, and then we sort of take it into our communities or into lateral communities of color. And so I'm just going to keep this slide up for a moment because there's a lot of risk in centering this conversation right now in the moment we're in, culturally and organizationally, which is I hope the consequence of this conversation is not that white folks leave this call and go, whoo, we're off the hook, because 100% you're not. And we cannot all get to that place of justice and liberation if we're not having some of this conversation around internalized harm and lateral harm. But if you notice in your body, especially if you experience white-bodied privilege, like stepping back or going, see, they have their own work to do, I encourage you to really lean into where there's a both and, because internalized oppression happens across many dimensions, right? So women experience internalized oppression as white women as well as women of color, and actually internalized oppression occurs among women. So there's some universality to this, and I'm going to continue to anchor this in my personal context and experience, because I think that those stories help bring some texture to what can feel like a really conceptual conversation. And I think some of you might be asking, like, how does this even happen? If you experience oppression or you experience marginalization, what like precipitates internalizing that and getting you to a place where you would then be sort of weaponizing that experience with other folks? And I think this is it is super complicated. And I want to anchor it in my own personal story. Look at this cutie. This is me, circa, I don't know, 5 or 6. She's such a sweetheart. I grew up as a biracial kid. My mom is white. My dad is from India. He came over to go to school here. He met my mom. These are my parents. They're also super cute, hippie love story, right? And then they had me. I also have an older sister who's white and a younger sister who walks through this world also as a gorgeous brown lady. And we were raised on what I call like the cultural tarmac, right, between cultures. So I was born at a time when interracial marriages were still not normative by any stretch of the imagination. And as a biracial kid, like really sat between dominant culture, whiteness, and immigrant South Asian culture, and didn't quite belong in either space, right? Also, I was raised at a time when assimilation was and still is like a really powerful trope in immigrant communities. So the aspiration is not to stand out, but to blend in and to aspire towards whiteness. Okay? And I'm seeing Elaine shake her head, like any children of immigrants on this call, this will probably resonate really deeply with you, right? That the idea is to sort of blend in. And part of this is because we have become sort of political actors in a bigger narrative about the model minority, right? That part of what our role is to sort of actually create more granularity in the hierarchy of racism that continues to oppress Black and Indigenous folks in this country, right? So there's this very clever role we're playing, not necessarily consciously, but that we fill out. And so as a kid, I had a great childhood, loving parents, high achiever, right? Did all the things. This is me graduating college. And I like nailed the model minority myth, okay? I landed this, like I have the receipts. I did all the things. Because there is a belief as you're growing up as a biracial kid that if you somehow achieve all of these things, you sort of arrive outside of your own oppression, right? That you somehow can get to this place where you're safe enough, you belong enough, you are part of it enough, where these systems no longer affect you. And that is the myth of white supremacy and the myth of assimilation, right? Right, so like my credentialing game is strong, y'all. I like overachieved in the overachievement department. And again, I see Lori and Elaine laughing because I think a lot of us probably on this call resonate with this need to sort of like play a role. And when you're not even conscious of that role, especially as a young kid, right? Like you're not always conscious of the degree to which you're playing within this broader narrative around you. And this doesn't look so bad, right? You're like probably like, Daisha, this is ridiculous. And you're right. I'm pretty fine. It's not to garner pity. I don't want to share that story for that reason. It's actually why I don't tend to share this story publicly, is because being raised in a biracial household is complicated. You're adjacent to a lot of privilege. You're also invisible from the experience of oppression. And I promise there's a punchline in here on safety. We're going to get to it. But part of what is really critical in understanding, and what I think has been central to my own understanding, my own healing journey in the work I do, is really recognizing this sort of context in a way that is like active and real and not intellectual. Right. So when we play into these tropes about the model minority myth, we are participating as folks of color in our own oppression. And then that becomes the map that we use to oppress other people. And that is the part that feels really juicy to me. Because I know that there is no person of color that I have ever met that is like, yep, let me get this so I can go and weaponize it. But this is part of the system we're in. And we've ingested the idea that white body supremacy is like such a standard in our humanity that even within our own cultures and across cultures and across communities of color, anti-Blackness, anti-Indigenous sentiment is so deeply woven into how we survive, right? So part of achieving at that range is to survive in a system that has said this is the only way to belong, right? I'm gonna pause, take a deep breath, let you take it in, because this probably feels a little heavy for like a lunchtime conversation. And I'm also checking out the notes. Marietta is saying that this really resonates deeply with her as a Black femme in the Pacific Northwest. Respectability politics are real. It's true. What's important to understand here in the story I'm sharing is less about the fact that it's singular or incidental, and more that it is the organizing principle of systems of oppression and racism, specifically in the United States, right? And how we have integrated. So I'd like to ask you to go on a little bit of a thought experiment with me about why this matters and the scale of and pervasiveness of this. So I'd like you to grab a pen and paper, and I'd love for you to draw a banana. And you know, no one's gonna see your banana. I'm not even gonna see your banana because I can't even see your faces. I don't even know who's on this call. But draw a banana or imagine a banana. I'm gonna give you a couple beats to do that. Okay. I hope that you can use the chat so I can see you, but I'm curious how many folks drew something or thought of something like this. I mean, again, we're not all artists on this call, it's all good, but was this generally what you all were drawing?
I did not include the shadow, right? So it lacked a 3D depth, and I only had a black pen, so it wasn't yellow.
All right. Thank you for participating, Lori. But you approximated it, right? And you're not wrong for folks who did this, but you're also kind of not right. So this is a banana, but it's actually specifically a Cavendish banana. And yet everyone here thought about that as the banana. And I'm curious, and this is where crowd participation is helpful because I can't see anyone's faces. And you're right, this is super disconcerting to not see who I'm talking to. Why do you think you all drew the same banana? Oh, wait. It's what we've seen. It's the only banana we know. Yep. It's the dominant banana. Yes, right? It's the flashcard, exactly. So many of us grew up in multicultural households where like this was a banana. It's certainly not the banana, right? In Hawaii, for example, apple bananas are the thing. But what I want to just like keep going with this metaphor for a little longer. What did it take effort-wise for us all to anchor to a single type of banana? It took very little effort, and yet the systems behind that work, right? It required our grocery stores to carry this kind of banana, right? And for our grocery stores to only carry this kind of banana, it required supply chains to only buy this kind of banana. And it required trade policies to reinforce that this is the banana people want to eat. So much so that if you want a different kind of banana, you really have to go out of your way for a different kind of banana. And it might be on like the other aisle, the ethnic aisle, or like in the grocery. And this is only if you're like privileged enough to live in a place with an ethnic grocer or an Asian grocer or a Latino grocer, right? Many times these bananas are just like not available to you. So even if I, as an individual, want to go get a different banana, it's actually a lot of work. And right, it's culturally reinforced that this is actually not normal to want these bananas. So if any of you bake banana bread, it doesn't say buy 3 Cavendish bananas in the recipe, right? There's some embedded assumptions about what you're out to buy, right? It's seamless. The amount of systems that are required to reinforce a belief. And it is actually really difficult to step outside of that. So at a personal level, I might want an apple banana. They're delicious, but to buy them requires a lot of effort. Interpersonally, if you tell me to come bring bananas to your house and I come with some apple bananas, you might look at me like I'm crazy, right? Because you are also conditioned to want a specific type of banana when you ask for it. Institutionally, right, or culturally, banana bread recipes, cartoons, people do not slip on like a banana peel that's an apple banana. You slip on a yellow banana in Donkey Kong or whatever other character reference you have. This is the way systems of oppression work. This is the way the model minority myth works. This is the way internalized oppression works. It is, as someone else who, not me, says, it is not the shark, it is the water. Right? And we're looking sometimes when we think about safety, when we think about solidarity, we're looking for the sharks. We have to start paying attention to the water if we want to build spaces that are safe. And it's a lot of work. And there's also a lot of places of engagement. And we'll get to that in a minute around like, where are the antidotes, right? But all this to say, to bring it back to like the personal story around being this biracial kid, living on the cultural tarmac, not really like, my oppression was both not valid, right, as a model minority, and was also sort of not acceptable. So like there was this dance I was constantly doing, and I had a lot of privilege. I did a lot of things, as you saw in my like checklist of credentialing, right? I have had a privileged life in a lot of ways. And that erasure or that inability to have both of those things happen at once can be really challenging within a broader system of racism, right? Because I'm also adjacent to like deep anti-Blackness right now, right, in this country. And so when we're thinking about building communities in our workplaces that hold both of those things at once, that I can both experience oppression and privilege while also being in solidarity with my Black colleagues specifically, my Indigenous colleagues specifically, right? Right now, we're seeing such a rise in anti-Asian and specifically East Asian and Southeast Asian violence in the United States, that both can be true. And it can be really difficult if what is reinforced message-wise is that like those experiences actually aren't valid. It's not the type of pain that is acceptable. And in fact, in order to have a place, you're not supposed to talk about it. Anna Gale is saying there's 19 plus types of bananas. I didn't know that, but thank you. Now I'm going to use that in my next presentation. I want to keep anchoring this to sort of to the applied space because I think work around anti-racism gets intellectual really quickly, especially for white folks. It is just like a thought experiment. And what I hope becomes really clear is like, this is a really lived experience for folks of color, right? And it's complicated. And I think there's a moment similar to like the banana moment where like what I call my matrix moment, where all of a sudden you just start seeing the code of like how you're participating in these systems complicitly. And again, I want to own that like I've been in the work of shifting power and oppression for 20 years, and this matrix moment happened like within the last 7. So we are all on a learning journey to recognize like where we're complicit and acting in these systems and where we can shift power and more readily be in solidarity with our colleagues of color. So some years ago, I was hired into a large organization. I was super excited about the role. I had negotiated well. I had like stated my needs. I got the salary I wanted. I was ready to go. I arrived. I had an awesome multiracial team working with these amazing Black female colleagues who are still very close friends of mine. And as time unfolded quite quickly, what became clear to us as a collective was the signals in the system that were actually encouraging conflict, competition, power hoarding in ways that actually create fractures and don't support solidarity and safety for folks of color in the workplace. So I want to talk through what I think are 3 pretty powerful features of organizations that sort of discourage solidarity. right, that discourage me from walking arm in arm with Black colleagues when they experience anti-Blackness, when we see white women and women of color not able to sort of sit together and figure out like, how are we approaching problems? So the first characteristic of this workplace is that flat is more fair. It's a somewhat flat organization. And this is sort of a buzzword in a lot of tech organizations, like we're trying to flatten the hierarchy. And oftentimes all we're doing is making invisible or masking the power that exists in an organization and making the rules of the game super unclear for most people. And so when power is masked like this, I wish I could see all of you too, Annie-Gail, thank you. So when power is masked like this, we will almost always default to systems of oppression, like our sort of habitual norms, right? We will default to power over rather than power with people, right? And power will always flow in masked environments towards where it's always flown, which means that those who have known the rules historically, who have written the rules, so like typically a lot of white men, right? When flat organizations occur, they benefit folks who have always held power. And we treat hierarchy like a four-letter word. Neither are necessarily better or worse. They're simply shapes. And we can use those shapes to our benefit, right? To power hoard, or we can make them explicit and use the shapes to liberate and have liberatory structures of being in power with people. Right? But so this is probably one of the most pervasive things I hear also in social justice groups, which is like hierarchy is a problem. Hierarchy is not the problem. The problem is we're using it dysfunctionally to not distribute power and shift power. And again, to not be in power with people. So in this organization, we were quote unquote building the plane as we flew it, which is like that hot startup vibes. And that's attractive, right? If you want to author change, like there's a pull there. And as someone with my history and like what I have done with my work life, that was really exciting. I had no idea saying yes to that was also saying yes to being complicit in ways that would cause friction or harm potentially like among women of color because the rules were no longer clear. And I'm just going to pause because my guess is if you're on this call, you've probably been in a situation where the unwritten rules of the game have existed in some circumstance, and you have potentially benefited from them, right? So like in the absence of rules as a model minority, I'm going to benefit from that within folks of color, especially with my credentialing. I have a PhD. It gives me this boost of unearned power, right? In ways that I have to constantly negotiate if I want to be in solidarity with folks, because I know how it will be used. And so I'm going to take a pause, give you a beat. You might feel like you're drinking from a fire hose. I feel like I may be drinking from a fire hose and I'm presenting. So I'm curious, thinking back to a time in organizational life where unwritten rules have kind of benefited you. And maybe not from a racialized perspective, but were there other things that you knew, the cheat cards? So one of my friends always talks about poker. I don't play poker, but she said that if you read a book about how to play poker, you will not only not do it well at all, but you'll like break a lot of the unwritten rules of the game, right? Like when to touch your cards, how to fold. There's all these things that you only learn by playing in the game. And the same is true in organizational life. There's a ton of rules that are never written down that disproportionately impact us based on our positionality in that system. Okay, I'm waiting for chats here. Mariana, thank you. Right, there's this code switching around being safer because of language we use or history, getting selected to join dominant spaces, right? I can't tell if the quiet in chat is because y'all are thinking or you're like, what the actual is happening here. So I'm actually gonna take a healthy beat. I'm a facilitator. I'm pretty good with uncomfortable silence. All right, here we go. Thank you, y'all. Death by committee rules are unclear. Awesome. Thank you for sharing, folks, in the chat. When you start recognizing how unwritten rules are benefiting you, there can be, often is, like a concurrent feeling of immense shame. Because most of us actually don't want that experience, right? And I also am a profound believer, like shame is actually not an effective tool for change. And we can talk about that a little bit more, but shame and fear and regret are like not powerful motivators to shift these systems. And we all do a bit of a dance with shame when we recognize we're experiencing access to power that is not provided to everyone, right? Here's the second myth that I think is really problematic that comes up and creates divisions among folks who have experienced marginalization. I'm sure many of you have sat on the other side of this, right? Where your employer is like, we hire great talent. Like if you are here, you are the best. And again, seated deeply in this model minority myth, like I want to believe that because I have been trained to believe that that is what I'm searching for, right? Is to be the person, the thing. This is a bit of a setup when it comes to solidarity and safety, because what this also means is if I find that I'm encountering a problem at work, it is mine alone to figure out. Because why would great talent not be able to figure out a problem or a tension at work? So it really incites hyper-individualism and me over we, right? And the other piece that comes up here is the seat at the table myth. Right? So in a flat or a masked structure paired with hiring great talent, it is actually unclear to me now if there are multiple seats at the table for me and my colleagues of color, or if we're all now jockeying to be the great talent to sit at that one seat. Right? So this becomes this like juicy cocktail of problematic inputs, right? And so you can see that they're also really subtle, right? You come into, like, I was hired to this company. I was super excited. I was recruited. I felt good about it. But if the other side of that coin or the implicit expectation is because you're great talent, you can figure stuff out on your own. And not only that, you will rise above others. Immediately, it seats us to be in competition with each other. That is not a condition of safety at work.
Daisha, this makes me think of some work I did a long time at a tech company where one of their slogans was, "We're a place where great people want to work." So then that might therefore lead to, if you don't want to work here because of the systemic oppression and harassment and discrimination, hence you are not a great person.
That I actually heard that at this place quite a bit, which was like, if it doesn't work out for you, it's because you were like not enough, like on and over and over. And again, that has really different consequences based on our positionality and lived experience. And there are pieces of that I might be able to refute that, like, my colleagues who identify as Black women might not, right? Because anti-Blackness is the most pervasive threat in organizational life right now, I think, within ourselves and across communities. Like, I think if we are not tackling that as a central issue, we're really missing the boat in this conversation.
And Trace added in the chat box, I experienced this, and then they put pay raises on people being more great than others.
Yeah, right. Individual KPIs or targets are not supportive of psychological safety at work. I mean, okay, that's a really extreme statement. I probably can walk that back a little bit, But I think the foundational principles of collective liberation require collectivism in a way that we do not operate at work. We are kind of entranced by the tall poppy syndrome. If I can grow faster, taller, and stand above and have power over, or sort of be a shining star, that reflects my greatness and my acceptability into the community I'm working in. And again, I think it's reinforced by this model minority myth for a lot of folks. Yeah, okay. So here's my question for you, and this is a somatic check-in. I want you to think about an experience you've had where you have been in deep competition with someone at work. Maybe it wasn't explicit, but it was subtle. I want you just to hold that memory for a moment. And I'm curious what you feel in your body. Just notice what comes up. Where do you notice potentially tension? Right, so I like notice it in my jaw, or I notice it in my chest. I notice a burning in my head, right? An awareness that I am not grounded or comfortable. And now think about a relationship you've had at work that has felt deeply collaborative, that has felt reciprocal and juicy and exciting. And just notice for a second what you feel in your body. What's different? And for some of you, this exercise might feel really hard in general because we are not invited to feel our bodies very often in the world in general. And I invite you to sit here and figure out what's true for you. Yeah, so you all have the blueprint, you know what safety feels like. We know what it feels like, and we know when we're out of it, and our bodies tell us that all the time. Some folks feel tense about both words. My like intuitive hit is that collaboration has not been collaborative, and potentially that's why it's been like collaboration, where like, you know, the school project and someone doesn't do the work. Yeah, sure. That's not really collaboration, right? Collaboration is like singing in rounds together. It's deep investment in one another's success. It's that I can't shine if you're not shining. That's collaboration. That's solidarity. That's what we need at work. But it requires, again, like, I'm like moderately afraid I might have scared everyone off this call of doing this type of work, but I think it requires a healthy understanding of the context we're working in, right? That we do have the power, influence, and wisdom in our bodies, as you're all indicating, like to shift these practices. And it's work that cannot be done only at the micro level. Cool. So this is my last real feature myth here. There's a bunch of others, but these are the three that I feel like are the most problematic. And this one I'm going to give you a pause here because you might be like, wait a minute, what? Isn't this what we're all supposed to be working for? Yeah, and so one of the big mythologies is like representation is the end game. And I think this is increasingly getting dispelled, and it's still such a hyper focus of most institutions that like, you're like, cool, we brought in a bunch of Black and brown folks, like go get along. Without negotiating that the systems we're in and the rules of assimilation are still there. And those rules of assimilation, as I've mentioned, actually require us to sort of manifest infighting. that's the nature of racialized hierarchy. It's asking us to actually be in competition with one another to get a seat at the table. And so if we are not attending to the conditions we're asking folks to work in, if we are just bringing in increasingly diverse workplaces and not negotiating those things, we're going to foster power hoarding, individualism, me over we, right? Only I can do this, rather than collaborative efforts and collective change. It is an inevitable manifestation of simply tokenizing folks to come into a workplace without doing that critical cultural work. So in the work we do, we follow what others have talked about as fractal theory, which is me being in right relationship is sort of reflective of the whole, and the whole is reflective of me, right? This is about living systems theory. And so when we think about how to shift into solidarity, antidotes for some of the things we've talked about today also sit along this kind of spectrum of nesting dolls. And it can be really overwhelming in hearing the sort of context of the story that I've shared today and thinking, how on earth do we make shifts that are meaningful and transformational at scale? And I think it's really important to always identify where your agency is, recognizing that we're sitting in these nesting dolls, and that oftentimes we're not actually attending to our personal and interpersonal accountability. We're only pointing to the structural and institutional. And so there's this, again, that both and I'm inviting you to think about and hold here, which is like, yes, similar to the banana, stuff isn't going to change if we don't shift structural and institutional practices. And there's a role, and there's something I can do every day and make an active choice in becoming aware of how I'm situated in all of that, right? The behaviors I have are not acontextual from these systems. And so I offer you this framework as a way to think about it and locate yourself in some of this work. It's what I've been using. The sort of what's mine, what's yours, and what's ours together piece, right? And what's ours together is like, what are the community conditions? What are the organizational conditions we're working within that continue to pull us out of relationship, right? Do they continue to pull us and ask us to sort of power hoard or fight amongst each other instead of being focused on the prize, which is dismantling systems of oppression? What's mine? What I have to do, what my role is like looking at anti-Blackness in South Asian culture. What I have to do is recognize, how does the model minority myth privilege me? As I also experience like oppression in that role. Where do I hold that both and then how do I be part of conditions of accountability with my colleagues of color? And what's yours is, how does it show up for you? What do you want to be true? What would it look like to heal that work? How do you feel that in your body? What conditions do you need to participate in that? I think this is my last slide. I have some appreciations, and then we can open up for questions, which is a little early, but, and I really wish I could see everyone. I'll just let this stay up here for a beat. I welcome you to read it. I am, sitting on the unceded land right now of the Multnomah, Clackamas, Clackamas, Tumwater, Watlala, and Chinook, and the Tualatin and Kalapuya tribes that sit on the Columbia River, just as Lori had mentioned at the start of our call. I'm in deep gratitude to the ancestors who have made it possible for me to be here today. And I have some really amazing colleagues in this work who are in the trenches with me. And I specifically want to call out Janine and Marietta, Steph, Heather, and Katie, who have actually collectively workshopped in real time this practice of solidarity and transracial solidarity. And I'm super appreciative of your time. It's like the limited resources we don't get more of. So thank you for spending time with me today. I'm curious to hear what's coming up for you, what questions you have. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see everyone. Well, I can't really see everyone, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Hi. Okay.
Thank you, Daisha. And as people are, maybe formulating their questions, I want to thank you for being so honest and vulnerable. And part of what I enjoy about you and the way that you present is you don't offer recipes or quick fixes or 1, 2, 3, go do this. To participate in your workshops and your conversation is to go deeply. And so sometimes that means we don't have fast and furious questions, because you've really submerged us in what you've given us, but also not just in an intellectual level, but also at that somatic level, and inviting us to return to the wisdom of our bodies and to what's coming up for us. So thank you for that. If you do have a question and you'd like to put it in the Q&A, please feel free to do that. And Elaine is working to upgrade us to a panelist mode, so that if you are comfortable turning on your video so that Daisha can see you, you can make that happen. And if you prefer to just put it in the Q&A, that's okay too. We are here to cultivate your psychological safety in the way that you want to participate.